Sicario 2 should have been set on the Canadian border. For balance.
You're on the wrong side of the border, gringo. The maple syrup business, it does things to people, you know?
What I'm envisioning right now, right? Josh Brolin, Matt Graver, amoral CAA agent, right? We're establishing his bona fides as a badass. Because remember, he was the good guy in Sicario 2 and the bad guy in Sicario 1. We're establishing his bona fides as a badass. And he drone strikes an FLQ member's family's house, like in front of him.
This is just infinite jest again.
We don't have KFC up here. It is called some weird acronym in French.
Okay,
They call it KFC in France. Yeah, not in
it's
Quebec,
called
my friend.
Saint-Hubert, first of all.
The Académie Française has no jurisdiction here, my friend.
Yeah, what Quebec, Montreal's a French black site. Yeah. Where like some DEA agent from like Vermont gets a Montreal necktie from a guy from the Rizzuto family.
We don't even call it an email. We call it a courriel. They don't even do that in Paris. What the fuck? It's like chained to a chair, rocking.
Yeah. Welcome to hell in Quebec land.
Bienvenue à l'enfer, gringo.
Yeah, bienvenue à el gringo. Hello, everybody. Welcome to TF. It is the birth of like Canadian national consciousness, I guess. Finally happening after like, 150 years, 175 years of Confederation.
As a result, this episode will be overdubbed in Quebecois French.
Yeah, that's right. C'est vrai. We are joined to talk all about the, I would say, crazy directions that Canadian politics has gone by the QAA podcast Canadian correspondent, former guest of this show as well, Liv Agar. Liv, how's it going?
It's good. I'm glad to be back on to talk about the JDPONization of my country. we're joining the third world, I think.
The imperialist and aggressor will meet his end in Canada. You're seeing like 60s communist posters where it's like a really big Canadian guy strangling a snake to death or something.
We're bringing back the FLQ, like Marxist-Leninism, but it's like also Anglos being like, yeah, we're also oppressed. We're the...
Yeah, it's like the FLQ starts as like a single issue party, and then people are like Anglos are like, no, we're Francophone allies.
Every Canadian, just like the most middle of the road shitlib Canadian reading The Wretched of the Earth and being like, he's writing about me. That's us.
Canadians being radicalized into guerrilla units, like digging pits with punji stakes in Windsor, Ontario for American trucks to fall into.
Yeah,
we'll get there. That's a line item on the agenda for this podcast.
When I used to talk to like American friends when I was young, they'd be like, oh, I have no more American friends, by the way. I've declared war.
Yeah. Well, you impose tariffs on them.
I am now spiritually at war with every American.
Yeah. Riley and Nate aren't even speaking anymore. It's that bad.
I say, oh yeah, well we would just spread out 1 Canadian per square kilometer of Canada. Come get us, motherfucker.
Just by average, so like a fifth of you are just in lakes.
Just angrily treading water, fueled by nothing but hatred for America.
just like treading water in the coldest lake in the planet. It's like, fuck you.
I mean, you don't understand. I mean, Liv, I think, also can shed some light on this, but we're booing at hockey games.
Oh, yeah.
That's DEFCON 1 for Canadians.
Yeah, Albertans are booing the American anthem in a hockey game. Like, that doesn't happen. This is a new development.
Canadian DEFCON 2 is like you bump into the Canadian and they don't apologize. DEFCON 1 is like booing your national anthem.
To understand, I think, what a seismic shift has taken place, not just in the last day, but over the last month in Canadian politics, you have to remember that Alberta is a place where the majority of the people who live there have so bought into like petro-masculinity that they just are Canadians with like Confederate flags on their cars.
They wear 10
like,
gallons. It's ridiculous.
They're like rolling coal.
How many is that in liters? What's the literage on that hat?
These are like coal rolling, Confederate flag waving like oil workers. And now, as November said, they're all reading The Wretched of the Earth and hating America. They're calling it the Great Satan. We're in the axis of resistance now.
This is the thing, right? The main thrust of what I want to get across this episode is that Donald Trump is insane and means all of the Hitler stuff, right? And it reminds me a lot of Putin. I'm going to get into this too. But if you remember when Russia invaded Ukraine for the second time and Sweden and Finland joined NATO pretty much immediately, because it turns out every Scandinavian, even when they're like a web developer or whatever, has a switch in the back of their head that says kill Russians on it, and you flip that and they start thinking about nothing else. I didn't realize Canadians also have this, right? Like I didn't think so, but apparently hidden under the hockey hair, there's a little switch and you flick that and every Canadian of every political tendency starts having visions of the War of 1812 and like sweating through their palms.
We burned down the White House once. We will do it again.
King Charles has been activated. His eyes are glowing red. He's walking across the Atlantic to Newfoundland.
Good, I have to protect my subject.
But we're gonna be getting into that in the sort of second part of the episode, talking all about, as we mentioned, what has happened in Canadian politics now that it's no longer able to project half of its political tendency onto America in the same way. But first, I want to issue a correction. And I know that this is coming right after our last free episode was celebrating how right we were about DeepSeek. Unfortunately, we now have to acknowledge how wrong we were about Doge. It was not a busy box. It was not the Department of Jangling Keys. It turned out that because it didn't do what it said on the tin, it wasn't just making recommendations about like IT efficiency.
No, it turns out they wanted to assume a kind of like cultural revolution Red Guard role where like a 19-year-old hits you with a bamboo cane and makes you denounce your old job kind of thing.
Yeah. And ironically, the Canadians have beaten them to that. There's going to be people renouncing their Ford F-150s in the street.
People friendly to Elon were installed in charge of multiple departments and then just let in a team of infants named Big Balls or whatever to go and like delete all of the USAID computers.
The Nazi child from Knives Out was serious about the Nazism, obviously, and has also just been like let into the corridors of power, and they're fucking shit up in there,
Yeah, it's like if Reinhard Heydrich had like broccoli hair, basically.
That would have been a look for him.
Yeah.
What if he'd had face tattoos as well?
Yeah.
One of the most goated SS Sturmpanzers.
I'm beefing with the Czech resistance right now. I have shooters out here, but they're shooting at me.
Literally the most cracked SS officer.
He gets killed and he complains about stream watching.
The Czech resistance just stream sniped Reinhard Heydrich.
But it turns out, right, that American soft power, much like American soft economic power, right? America is rebelling against the system. We talk about this in a British context as well, right? Like right-wingers hating the police because the police who are designed to protect them aren't being sufficiently deferential. It's a very similar dynamic of, I think you can call it like a coup, right? That is occurring, a sort of self-coup.
It's like, this system that's rigged in my favor isn't rigged in my favor enough. I'm going to like pull all of the wires out of it.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about this as a genuine fascist moment. And if you're trying to square the circle as to why it's happening, it's that I often think you have to understand fascism as and also I'd be interested to know what Liv has to say about this, because you talk so much about like these crazy fascist belief systems, but that fascism I see as like a cancer operating on capitalism, where all of what capital wants, the endless wars, the crackdowns, the sort of brutal the brutal punishment of people lower down the social hierarchy, those almost autoimmune, or not cancer, but even an autoimmune disease, those immune reactions, those things that support capital get just turned up. The lever is broken off, and then that begins to consume itself. And I think that's what we're witnessing now.
Yeah, it seems like fascism in broadly all of its contexts is structured as a thing that is attempts to protect the ego aims of like whatever political body, but does so irrationally. Like there was such a power towards this claim of self-protection for the political body that it begins to identify threats that don't exist.
Yeah, we're going to paint over all of the like murals at FBI headquarters that say stuff like corporate values.
Yeah.
They're gonna have to get rid of anything relating to Hoover because of how much he loved cross-dressing. They're like, well, that's gotta go.
The first DEI Fed.
And this is a reflection of what Elon Musk did with Twitter. He broke in, assuming, as you say, Liv, right, that the threats to his political aims were everywhere, imagining them, finding evidence of them in like 4 shirts in a broom closet, and then, destroying it as a viable business in the process.
I mean, the thing that's always fucking me up about this lately, whether it's with the tariffs or any of the other Hitler stuff, right, is you expect as a materialist that there's the kind of the room from network, right, where somebody's going to sit Trump down and go, yeah, but you can't do that because of capital. And it just seems like there isn't one of those. Mm-hmm. Like you say, like all of the kind of like business interests, all of the capital that's like lined up and bought the ticket for fascism is always surprised when they take the ride and figure out there's no levers attached anymore.
Yeah, like you see this under like the Nazi economic policy too, where they basically just think that they can like brute force their way against economic capitalist laws. Like we can just control everything. It doesn't, like, all of these economic contradictions we're introducing, it doesn't matter. We can just continue to win brutally.
Well, what if I call the contradictions Jews? What then?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think Zuckerberg, Bezos and co, the various other American oligarchs, having pretty much like thrown their weight behind Trump and been like, this is fine actually 2 weeks ago, they're now left with only one lever to pull, which is to post President Xi, my country yearns for freedom. Yeah.
There's a lever in Chinese. We don't know what it stands for or means, but we know what it'll do.
Turns out that it just said develop way better AI.
Yeah, it's the Trump singing in Chinese lever. It's all we can do. We're going to replace him with Chinese AI Trump.
Yeah, it drops like $4.75, and it's just like, here, develop a better AI with this. We could. Maybe you can.
Very good. I really wish I could speak Mandarin because I would love to do the Trump impression in Chinese. I just think it would be so beautiful.
You're a talented linguist.
It's a bit that requires like 1 to 2 years of setup, but the payoff, immaculate.
Yeah, well, because also the Mandarin has to be good enough that no one can accuse me of doing a parody Chinese accent. Yeah. That's the problem.
You have to get...
It's a barrier to entry.
Like with your Russian, you have to get like good enough in Mandarin to win a stand-up comedy competition in China.
You get just like calling all my business partners. I need 2 years off.
You get one stand-up show out of it, and it's titled whatever the closest Chinese analog to Pindos is.
Yeah. Whatever they call. Yeah, lifetime bitch. That's what it's called.
Thank you, Chen Weihua, for that one.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, but like this is something that financial markets didn't see coming. Basically,
they
nobody
all thought there
in
was
politics.
Still the room from network. They thought they were in the room from network, and meanwhile, like Trump was kind of like blundering around outside golfing while Elon Musk was sending like 19-year-olds in to ransack the place.
Well, that's what funny is. They are in the room from network. He's just not in there. He's wandering around the golf course caked up,
doing the like monologue to like nothing to nobody.
Yeah. Well, and also like it's significant as well that it's like this is a group of like 19-year-olds. I go back to talking about elite ossification and elite cycling, where like in Britain we have an incredibly ossified cadre of elites who are very good at defending their powers and it's very hard to move them. Whereas what Trumpism represents a lot of things. It represents a genuine cycling of one half of the elites in America who are able to actually bring ideas not that will solve the problems of the day, but that will at least confront them, or people think will confront them.
Yeah, I'm not sure why the problem turns out to be trans people, but fuck it, I guess, whatever.
Yeah.
Well, fuck.
The neocons of yesterday, all those people, they've spent the last sort of several years getting pushed out. January 6th pushed them out. They're gone, right? And now it's like 19-year-old like tech groypers who might be in a murder cult or whatever, who are now these are the people who are the conservative shock troops. It's like all of those like Cheney acolytes who put together the Iraq War. Those guys are out.
The Democrats only have old psychos. They've got psychos who remember Vietnam. Okay, we've got very new psychos. This guy, look at him, he's 7 years old. I put him in charge of the CDC. He's 7 years old. It's beautiful.
Like, Biden said to Netanyahu, by way of explaining why he had to put a hold on the like 2,000-pound bombs or whatever, that it's not Scoop Jackson's Democratic Party anymore, right? Which is the oldest cunt thing to say possible.
The inventor of the ice cream scoop.
It's not Holden Blood Feast's Republican Party anymore. You know?
Is that all these old movement conservatives, the core of the movement, whatever, the GOP stalwarts are getting replaced by 19-year-old groypers. No one knows what to do about it because they're all like accelerationists. They're all have a very different view of like what global hegemony means.
Yeah. Well, this is the thing that strikes me, right? Is, as we're going back and forth with the tariffs about whether, something's going to happen or nothing ever happens, is that we're now on a course where something has to happen, right? Like there's too much stuff has happened at this point, and now there's a real like collision course here, and I don't know where any of this leads, and that's pretty frightening.
I don't think they do either. It's just there's no one at the wheel. We're just gonna see where it goes.
Let's just do it and be legends.
He can't see over the dashboard.
Yeah. The guy at the wheel can't see. It's just broccoli hair over a steering wheel.
I mean, to be clear, this is partly because of the ossification you mentioned earlier. Like, there were long periods where Biden functionally wasn't president, right? Because it was like Sullivan, Blinken, and whatever the fucking third guy in the room was doing.
The ghost of Scoop Jackson.
Yeah, the ghost of Scoop Jackson were like ordering things, right? Yeah, and so you have this situation where I think it's a fair judgment to say if this can happen as a result of an election that was basically a coin flip, that problem isn't just on, like there's a lot of responsibility to go around to that, and it dates back further than Trump,
Oh, always. It's like big balls is an effect, not a
this
Elon Musk and big
individual
balls.
tumor is like, obviously very, very bad, but exists because of a systemic problem.
Well, they say we've got ossified elites in the Democratic Party, and I say, why doesn't Ho Chi Minh come here and tell me that himself?
Well, this is why Trump's trying to make Canadian Ho Chi Minh right now.
Yeah.
Just a twinkle in the eye of an Albertan oil rig worker, but
OG Min, is that?
Yeah. But just like using like an Iranian supplied Shahed drone and just shouting "give her tits" before hitting the go button.
Out for a rip written on the side of his ball.
We're about to see a kind of snowmobile 9/11 style attack on a series of border posts.
Yes.
I cover myself with Semtex and strap myself to the skidoo.
I cover myself with l'explosive plastique.
Except it wouldn't be. It would be the squarest. It would be like convenient fucking bon cop bad cop. It would be the most like middle of the road Ontarian you've ever seen detonating his suicide vest in the border crossing at like Windsor.
I like a bunch of like Patagonia Fleece Vancouver guys are gonna run down into that one bit of Washington State that like abuts Vancouver and just kill everyone in witness protection.
And I feel like we're sort of missing like one key component here, which is that like this is really bad for the state of the world, right? But this is great for Drake's career because he's been like, I feel like after the whole like Kendrick stuff during the Grammys, like I've been really wondering how does this guy get his career back, and if he's able to like liberate the six, like I don't know.
That's like our version of like the Balkan Civil War like music.
Yeah, it's just I wasn't expecting Drake to kind of form a paramilitary unit or for it to commit so many war crimes.
Alaska secedes from the US to become part of Albania.
Yeah. In 30 years, the UK Labour Party, attempting yet again to win power from reform, uses a song that it turns out was by Drake about the war and actually is quite offensive. But the death toll, the Doge death toll, it is bizarre that like the modern swastika is an AI generated cartoon of a Shiba Inu.
It sucks. It fucking sucks so bad, dude. Like it. Not only are these guys like little Hitlers, but they're also cringe and stupid.
First is tragedy, then is big balls.
Yeah. I mean, it's not like the original Nazis weren't cringe and stupid too, but like there's an imminence to it this time, with the AI generated images and shit, where you're just like, I can't believe these guys are going to be the ones who kill all of us,
I want to talk about one more thing about America America before moving up to Canada, which is, of course, that this problem may soon just solve itself.
Yeah, it might die.
Well, because Elon Musk is now working directly with Boeing on the delivery of a new Air Force One. So,
oh, please.
Let me just say, JD Vance, you are Boeing to be president.
To be fair, that would be the most narratively fulfilling way for Trump to die. It would be like I've been thinking a lot about Donald Trump's death, right, recently, for normal reasons. I don't think there's an unsatisfying way for him to die. Like, maybe nuclear war because we all die too, but like, other than that, there's not a bad way for him to go. Even if he dies of like disease and old age and goes out like Stan Scherer, that's fine. That's great. I'm having a great time. But like him getting like assassinated by a leftist, funny. Assassinated by a rightist, way funnier and more likely. They're the only ones who have been putting numbers on the board. But like dying in an Air Force One crash, perfection, magnificence.
Like, Mr. JD Vance, you are one Boeing safety inspection away from the presidency.
As Air Force One is going down, he's like,
I can't believe I'm going out like the former Prime Minister of Poland. Under mysterious circumstances.
It's weird. They looked into it and that birch tree was actually a registered Republican. So who knows what the fuck?
Like slip and fall funny. That'd be hilarious. Like, just as you say, gets ill and dies. That'd be funny.
Assassinated by the FLQ. Funny.
I mean, suicide would be if like he's just been feeling like in his feelings about like if he sees a really big truck and it's just like I just want to drive away from all this.
Okay, let me go up a step. Suicide by cop.
Yeah, what if you're president and you go for Secret Service member's service weapon?
They have to let you take it. That's your gun, basically. They work for you. They have to let you take the service weapon.
A cop having to shoot Trump is so the fucking Wesley Snipes crying meme. Like, can you imagine?
Yeah.
Can you imagine how they'd feel?
Bang, bang.
Sir, I will never let you commit suicide by cop. I will be a Samaritan.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like the funniest way he could die is like in a heated gamer moment, right?
Well, like he has a stroke like live on stream.
like he's on like Aiden Ross stream and he has a heart attack.
Well, when he runs for his third term, that's what he's gonna have to do. They're just gonna like wheel his hospital bed to like Aiden Ross's stream.
Trump Adam 22 arc.
You say runs for, he's not going to have to run for shit.
Yeah.
Like, this is the point of tearing all the copper wiring out of the walls and stuff is, turns out all that constitution was like real flimsy, you know?
Yep, that's right. No, look, so yeah, it's all it's going to take is, all the voting machines, they're cucked in soy, like USAID is cucked in soy. That's the other thing about USAID. If they knew what fucking USAID did, they would not have deleted that agency. That is like one of America's top ways to teach like police forces in South America how to pull fingernails.
Yeah, well, what it is, right, in terms of like the deck being stacked in your favor is it's like loudly pulling the stack of aces up your sleeve out and throwing them onto the table and being like, they're trying to fuck me over by weighing down one of my sleeves with all of these useless aces.
It's worth one. It's literally the worst card.
But also I think it's important to remember is that fascism has its own aims and that like the aims of like national conservatism, the aims of fascism are kind of different from the kind of thing you can achieve with soft power, right? Because so many of the aims are about sort of conquest and punishment for its own sake, not just about the effective exertion of control. I mean, again, I know Liv is one of the people on this show who actually thinks about fascism specifically most, because that's a lot of what QAA talks about. I mean, does that strike you as correct?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it is also just that they're like, they have an especially dumb guy's understanding. It's like a hoi for brain about like, and it's like, why am I sending, infantry equipment to this other country? Like, that doesn't progress my aims. I want to own it, the state. That's like...
Well, this also explains Trump's like map painting thing.
Yeah, because wasn't it literally like he saw how big Greenland was in the Mercator projection and was like, we want that.
Same with Canada to an extent. And he is 100%. This is a thing that I can't say enough because we've been saying it for months, if not years, right? Is that he is serious about all of this shit. And so when he's like, oh, Canada should just be the 51st state, like he means that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, he's like, it'd be bigger for America. It's like they listen to like the kind of dumb lib understanding of USAID, but they're like, well, it's bad though. We shouldn't be helping them. When it's like, no, you'd set up that way for you to dominate.
Yeah. I always say like that one of the hallmarks of postmodern conservatism is ultimately it's an ideology that's mediated through media, right? It's about reacting to marketing campaigns. So it's whether that's like a rainbow Deloitte float at Pride, that as opposed to being like, oh, that's Deloitte just marketing itself, right? You're like, it's Deloitte, but Deloitte is compromised.
Well, this is where I come back to Putin again, because that was also a case of a guy starting to believe this stuff and seeing like Eurovision one year and being like, Europe's gay now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The prophecy has come true. Europe has become gay and Muslim. There's only one way to stop them.
Yeah.
Getting Chechens to invade Ukraine.
But, and it's the same thing with the USA, they're getting mad at a marketing campaign. It's just you're getting mad at a marketing campaign for America being able to unilaterally rewrite your mining laws. If you're like Botswana, for example, right? Like it's teaching fingernail pulling in Central America and rewriting African like mining laws. And they're like, no, they're helping, and helping is gay. We're hurting. We like hurting, not helping.
Like, I feel like I got owned in 2022 when it was like, he's not going to invade Ukraine. That would be stupid. It's a similar thing where it's like they want everything and they can't, like, half measures like, oh, we'll influence this area isn't enough. It's similar with the Nazis.
Yeah. And like the thing I always come back to, right, is that like, because both Putin and I guess now Trump have been in politics for a while, Putin much longer, and like were sure always evil, but like had like, sort of like they were shrewd, right? And so for a long time, even leading up to the invasion for a bit afterwards, you had guys who are like, journalists in Russia listening to this 8-hour speech that was completely off the rails about how Ukrainians are actually more closely related to dogs or whatever the fuck, and going, what does he mean by this? He can't literally mean that they're going to invade Ukraine, because that would be nuts. And then he did, and it's just like, you have to, this is going to be the story of whatever the rest of the Trump presidency is having to grapple with the fact that this is a guy who is like fucked mentally and actually thinks this stuff.
Yeah, Putin lecturing Steve Rosenberg. Well, you say that invading Ukraine is a crazy thing to do, but can I draw your attention to the fact that it's a history lesson for you, Mr. BBC man. In fact, there is a proud Russian tradition of being fucking mental.
Well, this is the thing. It's a weird coincidence, right, that between Canada and Ukraine, we've had like not one but two nuclear-armed superpowers just decide that they're going to annex countries that are sort of like much less populous, border them, have a population that's kind of like ethnically increasingly indistinguishable in a way that you can kind of like make an argument facetiously that they're kind of should be part of the superpower.
Has language laws, and are full of Ukrainian nationalists.
And both are going to be liberated by Ukrainian Nazi paramilitary.
It's like, this is the shadow war, right? We're ticking off the two most Ukrainian nationalist countries in the world, Ukraine and Canada.
Le Bataillon Azov.
Yeah, it's dark woke. Justin Trudeau goes in a helicopter to find Yaroslav Hunka, and it's like, you have to come back for one last job. We'll applaud you in Parliament again, and this time everyone will know.
I don't know why the inflection point for the entire world had to be Ukrainian Nazis, but like, okay, sure.
The UPA is everywhere. It's like you're wearing a bulletproof vest. You're wearing a bulletproof vest, and it's got like two exactly bullet-sized pieces of armor on it that happens to be shot both times right there where Ukrainian nationalists are. But and so basically, right, what the politics of Canada in particular have been turned utterly fucking upside down since the election of Donald Trump in November. We talked about it a little bit with Luke Savage when it was all incipient. We didn't know what was going to happen. The Liberals were consigned to the dustbin of Canadian political history with like sponsorship scandal level numbers, right, in the absolute toilet.
Comrade Savage can't be with us today. He's making Molotov cocktails in his bathtub.
Yeah. And it looked like you were going to welcome in like 1,000-year Polyev Imperium, a guy who's never had a job outside of like Ottawa. But now Canada and Mexico are joining Iran, China, and Russia in the axis of resistance.
Yeah. Donald Trump has created the War Canadian, or I guess reactivated the War Canadian. And so now, like, across the political spectrum, you're having like, I never thought I'd die fighting side by side with a guy who is like parking his truck outside Parliament donuts or whatever.
We're going to send the convoy down south to do donuts on the lawn in Pennsylvania Avenue.
Quebecois guy and Mexican guy both calling each other gringo. There you go.
Liv, can you just give us a little bit of an update? We sort of did the basic table setting of like who Poilievre and Trudeau and Jagmeet Singh all are with Luke about a month ago. Can you give us a table setting of just how things have changed in the last like since Trump's election?
Right. Yeah, because before this, it really seemed like Canada was just America. And I think that's like culturally the case because we just consume American content online. I think it's like any other kind of Anglosphere. Like the majority of the political content comes from America. And so there was this general trajectory of the last like probably decade where things get more and more online. And the Canadian state can't like force you to watch a Canadian version of it. It's like, no, we have our own Daily Show. You can't watch the Daily Show.
You have to watch This Hour Has 22 Minutes with Rick Mercer.
Exactly. Yeah. He's our Jon Stewart. But
due to tariffs, it only has 22 minutes.
But recently, that's really been obviously destroyed because of the tariffs. And it's been interesting to see how different conservatives have reacted to that. Because slowly, after 2015, Canadian conservative politics has looked a lot more like Trumpism, you know, especially after the convoy and Poilievre getting into power. He really started to embrace that political faction, move away from the kind of old, fiscally conservative, socially liberal Tory sort of ideology, which was already kind of crumbling because Canada is America and it's, you know, failing in a similar way. But this has been like a totally like dividing moment among the conservative political figures in Canada, where some of them are smart enough to understand that they have to now differentiate themselves from Trumpism. They have to be like, oh no, we're doing Canadian nationalism. You know, I'm standing with Trudeau. And then the particularly stupid ones are kind of continuing on their, I guess, like pro-Trump grift because they understand where their bread is buttered and it is in Trumpism. So like there's like Doug Ford in Ontario, for instance, who's a progressive conservative, is obviously more on the right, is much smarter, and he has been like explicitly anti-Trump, you know, in his incredibly stupid way. He's the Premier of Ontario and the brother of the previous crack smoking mayor of Toronto.
Well, imagine if they put tariffs on crack.
I wish Rob Ford was still alive to deal with this.
If only there was some podcast you could listen to about Rob Ford. Yeah, no, I've seen the hats. I've seen the Canada's not for sale hats. And trying to meet Trump on his own sort of territory of the shittest hat you've ever seen is like that's beautiful.
Yeah. Canada's equivalent of Drake's drum is Rob Ford's crack pipe. Like when it starts to smoke, you know the polity is in danger, and he's going to rise from the dead to defend it.
Yeah.
But we never actually saw a body, right? Like he just went over that cliff in the like Pontiac that said Toronto on a license plate. There's a huge cloud of smoke and flame, and then we never actually saw.
There was always a huge cloud of smoke around that guy. Who's to say?
Yeah, we did our own Reichenbach fall.
Yeah, he went over the falls hand in hand with his worst enemy and closest lover, crack.
So, is this the Scotlandification of Canada? Is Canadian politics going to start? Is it going to start being better because they hate the Americans so much?
Many such cases.
That's the thing about Scottish politics. It's like, oh, I hate immigrants, but what I hate more is the English. Like that is, you know, that's the ultimate.
But we weren't there for a long time. The sort of self-defined difference between Canadians and Americans was always just like, and this is for most people, right? Is some people like, oh, we're a little bit nicer. Your standard Ontarian liberal thinks of themselves as a bit European, and your standard like Albertan conservative is like, no, we're basically American, but we are different. But when basically told the one thing that an Albertan conservative loves more than triggering libs is the oil industry. They love the oil industry. They're crazy about the oil industry. They once hired an actor and covered him in oil and sent him to Parliament in character as Bernard the Roughneck, who then said, you mustn't do anything about the oil. You must allow the oil to keep flowing, or I Bernard the Roughneck, will be very sad.
What would this guy be called? I don't know, probably Bernard.
And so now it is a moment of Canadian national identity creation, where it used to be, I always feel like Canadian identity is determined on an east-west rather than north-south basis in many cases. So like people from Toronto are more similar to people from Chicago than they are to people from Vancouver generally. People from Vancouver are more like people from Seattle than people from Montreal, and so on and so on. And this is the first instance since maybe 1812 where there seems to be a broad-based north-southification of a Canadian national identity, because it was a fake country until very recently.
The common
comrades in BC are sending us their bud, and we are sending back maple syrup in return.
Yeah, but you, as you say, Liv, right? It has actually fractured the right between people like Polyev, whose pitch to Canadians has been, I am the closest thing to Trump you can vote for, but who is actually more like Ron DeSantis than Trump, right? Because he exists purely in reaction to Trump, and he's never done a job other than politics for his entire life. Awesome. He's never had a real job as Pierre Polyev. And he's also reacts infinitely to what online like conservatives like say he should think. He is Ron DeSantis. And he's been unable, it seems to me, to distance himself from Trump, much in the same way that Kamala was unable to distance herself from Biden.
Yeah. Ford is like the case of a conservative who kind of is like, Ford is pretty smart in that he doesn't do like the trans culture war stuff. Like he realizes that that's poison. Like he currently called an election because of how high his approval, like not his approval rating. His approval rating is negative, but how high he is in the polls. Because there's, a split between incredibly incompetent liberal provincial party and an NDP party, it's a little bit lefter than the Liberals. But the funniest example are like Danielle Smith in Alberta, who is essentially a part of the new Canadian Quisling right. Like Polyev is around in the middle where he realizes he has to posture as against Trump, but then he's kind of trying to be like Trump. Danielle Smith is basically like, no, we should just do everything he asks us to do. I understand that there are no actual demands, and maybe he kind of wants to annex us. But all of this, like these countermeasures, these tariffs are a bad idea. And it's really fucked her. She's very stupid. She believes in like conspiracy theories. She thinks that during Joe Biden's America, planes were being flown in with chemtrails to like harm Albertans. I know she said that publicly.
Just like we're gonna go up and down over the border to try and fuck with Alberta.
The people of Alberta are too dangerous.
Yeah. Also,
they know the truth.
The people of Alberta are being chemically poisoned, not from the air.
Guy who calls Biden genocide Joe, but specifically about the Albertan chemtrails.
The people of Alberta, they're too free thinking. They're drink driving legally. Zbigniew Brzezinski just told me that. I gotta fly a plane over. We have to put a cordon sanitaire around legalized drunk driving.
Like now we're going back to Nixon. Yeah, Biden believes he's talking to Nixon. That's how much dementia he has.
No, where are we at on this?
This is from the view from 1,000 feet of what's happening on the Canadian right. And also not just since like the other contenders to replace Justin Trudeau as Liberal leader, as the standard bearer of dark woke, have like, again, successfully, I would say, distanced themselves from him and his government, mostly because Chrystia Freeland fucking hates him.
Again, it's weird that Chrystia Freeland is personally involved in both of these things. just like getting back from my Ukraine war to be like, Chrystia Freeland's in this one too.
It's weird that she's going to have to oppose a Nazi.
Well, siding with some other ones.
Yeah.
Well, this is the thing, right? This is what it takes. Broad-based people's war. Every Canadian is now a Maoist guerrilla. Like every single one, whether that's like the Ontarian cop from Bad Cop, Bon Cop, the pedophile in the little like Toronto Raptors car. Like Drake.
Yeah. Roger, yeah.
There is no evidence that Drake has owned a Toronto Raptors little car.
Bryan Adams.
Yeah.
There are others.
I'd say that, and on the conservative side, as they're scrambling to figure out how to respond to this, I agree with you, Liv, by the way, that only Ford Nation, as ever, is getting it right. Is that at the same time, the response on the liberal end is pretty, I would say, combative, whether that's Trudeau saying
Justin Trudeau discovering his paternal heritage of anti-Americans.
Whether that's Trudeau saying, we're basically going to allow the North American auto industry to grind to a halt if you do this, right? Because that's what would happen.
Yeah, like I do have like the Angevin chip in my brain, because like if Trudeau like put 100% tariffs on Teslas and dropped the tariffs on Chinese EVs, I would die for him. Like if I could buy a Chinese EP at market price.
This is what it's like. This is what it's like when you speak to a Finnish person and you're like, I mostly do software development, and then you mention anything Russian and they just are transported mentally to like sitting in like a snowdrift for 6 weeks, shooting people from miles away, right? It's in there. It is in there.
Subsisting on a diet of pure meth.
I mean, listen, if Trudeau really wants to like live up to his patrimony, the only answer is to allow China to start basing missiles in Mississauga.
Yeah, in strategic areas outside Kelowna, Thunder Bay, Trois-Rivières, and Dartmouth in Nova Scotia, we have allowed missile bases to be installed pointing directly at America. But we were saying about like the Canadian right being kind of divided by this, and opinion polls have sort of ticked back towards the Liberals' favor, it seems. I mean, I don't know the different reputations of the different Canadian polling companies, but two recent polls, I actually cannot believe this, two recent polls, and this is being recorded, by the way, on February 3rd, had the Liberals within 2 points of the Conservatives, where the Conservatives had a 20-point lead 2 weeks ago.
Do you remember all of the sort of like different photo shoots Saddam Hussein used to do, right? Whereas like whenever he was feeling like he needed to be a bit Islamist, he'd come out in the robes. Whenever he needed to be a bit communist, he'd come out in like the military uniform with the beret, right? I wasn't expecting Mark Carney to switch from his kind of like, you know, international steward of capital, like suit and tie kind of fit into the like People's Army of Vietnam fit. But you know, fine, sure.
Shirt idea is Mark Carney is Che Guevara. No, that's
no one would get that. That's visually, that's nothing.
It's visually impossible. It's just Mark Carney in a hat.
What about Che Guevara, but it's got a Z on the end of Che? How about that?
But I want to go back to Liv, right? This is the environment that we're in. What do you make of these polls that have the Liberals unbelievably, after running the Brandonist government in North America, even including Joe Biden, right, that has them put back in contention? Is it just that the play to Trump, forget we're two different countries strategy has blown up so badly? Have the Canadian Liberals managed to distance themselves from Trudeau in ways that like Kamala never could from Biden? Like how does this get explained?
I do think that it is basically the same as Kamala Biden. I mean, especially if Freeland wins, but even with Carney, like they still have a lot of the negative association in relation to the housing crisis and obviously also like inflation. Things are more expensive than they were 5 years ago. What the hell? But like this is such, I think, a crisis for Canadians that it doesn't matter, or it might not matter. I guess we'll see if the polling, you know, shows that there is a continual change like this. But like people are, when there are these crises, people tend to like their political leaders like more. Like during COVID, like, you know, a lot of approval, or during early COVID, a lot of leaders had like a increased approval rating because it's like you want to believe that the person in charge of this knows what they're doing. And then, you know, Trudeau had a speech, was it yesterday or a couple days ago, where he, you know, announced the retaliatory tariffs, and people seem to have received that positively. There's this yet developing Canadian national consciousness of buying Canadian, which obviously, you know, the Canadian bourgeois class are equally as evil as the American one. You know, that's not doing anything morally. But yeah, I mean, it really is. This is also because of Poilievre not being particularly popular. Like people hate him. He's annoying. Like he has a negative approval rating already. So like even if he does get into power, it will be like basically Keir Starmer approval rating, which will be funny to witness.
Donald Trump.
Yeah.
Yeah, or Donald Trump approval rating too. Yeah. It should be interesting to witness. I do think that this is like the best thing that could have happened to the Liberal Party, barring like them getting their own Obama, which, you know, there's no way that is. I was talking to my mom about this and she's like, I don't think Canadians have it in us to be like that charismatic. Like, I don't think that would happen. Like Trudeau Senior was an aberration. Maybe that's how you know that Quebecois aren't Canadian. That he was like
capable of generating Obamas. I guess the other thing I've been thinking about is if it really gets to the point where the US tries to annex Canada, they'll have to do, you know, like the Russians in Ukraine, and kind of like war on Canadian culture, right? Which means they're going to be like taking all the Alice Munro books out of libraries.
We're going to be
like,
playing Nickelback, like a revolutionary way.
Yeah. Resistance takes the form of like a sort of Margaret Atwood short story. You know?
They're going to be like holding big parties of burning box sets of corner gas. Like Brent Butt will be like put in jail forever. But like, I think it's also worth talking about. We're talking about like the political reaction to these tariffs in terms of polling. It's difficult, of course, to see where in such fraught circumstances anything is going to go. I mean, the fact that the Canadian right has largely spent since kind of Bush Jr. really has spent largely aligning itself with the American right on the basis that everyone could agree we're basically the same place. That's like only has minor formal differences. That strategy appears to be a backfire. Will it backfire enough that it saves a deeply unpopular incumbent government? God fucking knows. right? But the whole thing became, I think, more of a toss-up maybe than it was, because it was going to be like a fucking rout. It was going to be like 1992 levels of the Conservative Party, 2 seats, barely a political tendency anymore. But I think it's worth talking also about what will the tariffs that are proposed actually do, and what were the retaliatory ones that were proposed. The tariff plans that Trump was proposing were going to be, okay, well, blanket 25% on everything coming in from Canada, 10% on energy, trying to be like, no, Alberta, Canadian Texas, Alberta, we still like you. Please don't hate us. And they're like, fuck you.
Yeah, the guy with the Confederate flag on his truck is recreationally shooting south at the border now.
Yeah. After NAFTA, right, a huge amount of North American industry became completely borderless. So an ordinary Ford car will cross the border dozens of times. Both borders.
Yeah, both borders. I mean, this is also part of why, if you look at the situation in Mexico, that's how high can one woman's approval rating go? Where every Mexican is pledged blood allegiance to Claudia Sheinbaum at this point.
But that's not just car makers. It's also food production, construction, all of which rely incredibly heavily on cross-border trade.
It's weird that every prepared sandwich you can buy in an American grocery store has one slice of bread made in Canada, one slice of bread made in Mexico, filling made in the US.
Yeah, one bread comes from the north, one bread comes from the south. They meet in the middle.
Yeah, beautiful, yeah.
Thing you CIAmen will never understand is that this is like a sandwich. And the dirty parts of the sandwich get made north of the border.
Also construction, where every construction worker and engineer in the U.S. is currently going to be discovered as the next Harrison Ford rebuilding Los Angeles right now. All those industries are going to be hugely impacted. But the Ford, General Motors, and Stellantis, the big 3 automakers, they would just completely, all production would grind to a halt. And, Trump says all you have to do is build your plant in the United States. You don't have any tariffs. But there is simply no way for American farmers to produce avocados in any significant number, right? There's no way to build all of those plants immediately, right? So I have some more statistics here. The U.S. imported more than $45 billion in agricultural products from Mexico in 2023, $40 billion from Canada. A third of the softwood lumber used in the U.S. is imported from Canada. And most of the people who failed to predict this, the sort of senior economists at large banks, for example, just are saying, well, what will happen is in all 3 countries, the burger paycheck ratio will get back out of line, right?
Well, this is the thing, right? Burgers are going to cost so much more. And traditionally, you would think, well, this would make Americans hate Trump. But there's at least a fifth of them now who I think are fully willing to eat wet cardboard in the dark and be like, I love you, President Trump. So
yeah, because the best way to understand this is not. It's been really interesting just to watch kind of economists and sort of editorial boards at the Wall Street Journal be like, this is so confusing. We don't really know what's going on. How the first Trump presidency, he was at least kind of a normal governing president, even if he was charismatic, as a character, a bit nuts. But now he's just being really kooky, and it must be Elon Musk. And it's well, no, what you've really got to understand is that his sort of loyal followers, they just want to see people get mad. And if they have to eat wet cardboard to see their sort of perceived enemies be made slightly less comfortable, they're really willing to do that. There's not really anything more complicated than that.
Well, back to the Nazis again, right? Getting shot up by the Czech resistance and being like, I am triggering the libs right now. You're actually mad at me, which means I win this argument by the fact of you shooting me with a gun.
But what Trump said on Truth Social, he said, this will be the golden age of America. There will be some pain, maybe, but maybe not. We will make America great again. It will all be worth the price that must be paid. We are a country that is now being run with common sense, and the results will be spectacular.
There may be pain, or there may not. It just sounds exactly like what a dentist would say just before they bring the drill in.
You might feel a slight pressure.
Yeah. So, but this is an economist, Nina Eishacker, wrote this paragraph that I want to read now, which I think is worth sort of recognizing. So prior to the 20th century, tariffs are the primary means of raising revenue for the state in the U.S., but they were also a greater issue for economic elites who are consuming luxuries from abroad. Cheap imports from abroad have risen in prominence due to the relaxation of trade barriers, and these goods help subsidize worsening standards of living for poorer workers who is displaced by mechanization or outsourcing to those same countries. Blanket tariffs on goods and services, at this point, look much more like a VAT on goods overwhelmingly consumed by poorer Americans. But, and I'll add to this, right, with all of the blame in all 3 countries squarely on the Trump administration.
Yeah, but you just have to rely on the kind of messaging operation of the Democratic Party to make that one stick.
It's most likely to be most ineffectively opposed in America, whereas we are seeing two different kinds of effective opposition in Canada, or two different kinds of opposition in Canada and Mexico. We haven't discussed China yet because that's a whole much larger issue.
Well, they're arming the Canadians, but it's actually Russia are arming the Greenland Inuit. The Inuit Rouge, as they're now calling themselves.
No, they're not arming Canadians. What they're doing is they're sending advisors.
Yeah. Military
bunch of Wagner Group guys in Ontario just being like, it's
great places to wait for winter around here, I have to say. Really.
So Scheinbaum was just like, yeah, we'll put some more troops on the border so it stops migrants and fentanyl or whatever. But in Canada, there's no migrants or fentanyl to stop.
What are you talking about? They made like 8 seasons of that show, The Border, which was largely about like, cases full of fentanyl being smuggled over the Canadian border.
Yeah, maybe that's what he watched The Border. We just have to show Trump Canadian
Trump
scenario.
getting really into like CanCon. Yeah. They've got these great cops up there. One of them speaks French. One of them speaks English. You don't think they're going to get along, but they get along.
One of them's bad, one of them's bum.
Comfior, the late great Comfior.
You heard about this corner gas?
It's made by Brent Butt.
That's right, his name is Ass.
It was named after an ass. I know. I thought it was crazy. So Mexico has delayed the application of the tariffs for about a month at the time of recording by saying, okay, we're going to put some soldiers on the border to like stop fentanyl or whatever. And in exchange, you get freed from the bad deal that you made. Canada appears to be sticking to retaliation at the moment.
Yeah, tie me to a missile and fire it at Washington, D.C.
Hell yeah.
And with provinces also setting their own rules. And one of the most important ones is around alcohol, because Canadian provinces, by and large, have centrally controlled alcohol stores. It's like Sweden.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
Right?
In Ontario, there's a place called the Beer Store. It's just run by the government. It's like feels very like post or late Soviet.
This is how all stores should be.
Yeah.
It'd be funny if like the Trumpists, having done their own Bud Light boycott, are actually brought down by a different Bud Light boycott in a different country. Little did we know.
I always thought it was really funny how the LICBO became like
The LICBO?
the LCBO.
Oh,
the Liquor
right.
Control Board of Ontario.
Okay,
the store where you buy like not just beer, but like booze.
For a second, I thought it was like the Bowflex, but
No, sorry. What's happened is that, look, because I'm talking to a fellow Canadian and we're talking about Canadian stuff, I am becoming Canadian again.
I see, yes.
You're feeling the urge to kill Yankees once again.
Like, you can't see it, but like a backwards Blue Jays hat is emerging on my head.
Oh God, it's horrifying.
I've got a Toronto Raptors mobility scooter.
I'm wearing like an oversized button-down shirt. I'm saying stuff like "give her tits." I got flannel on. All this flannel on me. I got military power.
Canadian advisor at the gender clinic.
Yeah.
Do you imagine yourself as Canadian?
But most provinces now have stopped buying American liquor, which actually, like the LCBO, is the world's largest alcohol buyer.
Like the NHS for alcohol.
Yeah, followed shortly after by one guy who keeps going to it, who is the world's like second largest alcohol buyer.
Doug Ford, as you mentioned earlier,
You
Liv,
just
right?
mentioned, yeah.
Yeah, Doug Ford. No, that was his brother. Doug Ford ripping up $100 million Starlink contract between the government of Ontario and Elon Musk, and then crowd corporations such as BC Hydro directed to stop buying American goods, and also a huge amount of the power that goes to the northeast of the USA coming from places like Niagara Falls, the St. Lawrence Seaway, being again immediately threatened as just stop export, right? The whole thing appears to be, yes, it can be turned off. And it seems as though, just to sort of go back to something we were talking about earlier, the Canadian right seems to have no answer other than Doug Ford.
Which is very depressing for them if you know who Doug Ford is. I mean, I guess he's doing well provincially. But yeah, they really have an identity crisis that I don't know how they're possibly going to solve. It's interesting, the further right you go, the further you get into Quislings. Like, I'm trying to think of like a very far right, like the Maxime Bernier People's Party, which attempted to do like what Reform is doing in Britain right now, and also what the old Canadian Reform Party did of like outflanking the Conservatives on the right. They're explicitly against the retaliatory tariffs. The BC Conservative Party, for instance, is also, who like are explicitly MAGA people, are also against it. Like Rustad was the leader of it, was saying that it was a bad idea and that we should just listen to Trump. So, and as the right is rising in America, or in Canada, Freudian slip, because of America, like, I don't know how they'll deal with that momentum going against them. Maybe we'll see some sort of like I don't think so. I think it really does just like fuck with the American or Canadian right for a couple years now. I keep doing the Freudian slip.
So this is from a recent profile of Poilievre. Dan Nolan, a former senior aide in the Harper government, said Poilievre was excelled at connecting with Canadians who felt worse off. He says, what Poilievre says resonates. He talks like he's been in a hockey rink. He comes across as a normal person. Trudeau just seems like he's from another universe. However, in a recent podcast interview, Poilievre told Jordan Peterson, again, this is like while this was going on, right? While this had started going on, when Trump was like, I'll blow up the Canadian economy. Poilievre goes on Jordan Peterson's podcast and says, the problem we've had in this country, and all countries offended by this horrendous wokeism, is that it's been focused on the grandiosity of the leadership and not the things that are great and grand about common people. And it's like, to be talking about that at this point, it shows you are so profoundly disconnected with the gravity of the moment that it would be bizarre for you to be taken seriously.
They're going to put a 25% tariff on summer of 69. It's inhuman.
But this is another sort of a polling company, Abacus Data. Their chief executive said, there is simply no Poilievre mania in Canada. And I can't see how this event does anything but dampen what is already relatively, I'd say, reactive support.
He's a damn man.
Yep.
Yeah, they didn't need an abacus to count all the Poilievre mania.
We mentioned, though, right, that the political crisis in Canada is mostly a crisis of the governing Liberal Party, because the Liberal Party is to Canada as the Tory Party is to the UK. Just spot welded into power basically forever because people vote for them without thinking about it.
Yeah.
And, the battle to take it over appears now to be largely between Chrystia Freeland, Mark Carney, the Zerpist guy that's ever gone to the UK.
I was going to say, wasn't he governor of the Bank of England?
He was indeed. He was our big Zerp guy.
Yeah, I actually didn't notice that he'd left. I didn't know
He's still there.
Who's doing it now?
Andrew Bailey.
Yeah, what's Mervyn King up to? Is he going to be prime minister of somewhere? Have I been sleeping? Is he leading the Inuit guerrillas in Greenland? What's going on?
Really waiting for a prestige drama about the inner workings of the Bank of England, a la Conclave.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly,
the white smoke goes up from the Bank of England.
They've lowered rates.
Yeah.
So this political crisis is defined largely as a crisis of liberal leadership. And it was a big part of the crisis in the Liberal Party was Justin Trudeau failing to manage the egos of people like Chrystia Freeland and Mark Carney and having them turn on him. But there is another controversy in the Canadian Liberal Party. Liv, can you please share this breaking news item?
Yes, so you can vote on the Liberal election if you join the Liberal Party. And there's been essentially, there used to be previously a conservative spoiler candidate, basically. He was I can't remember his name. He was a former Liberal MP in Ontario who actively disparaged the French language and said that he wasn't going to speak it. He was disqualified because you need to be bilingual. But a new one has come along, which is great. I love it's cooler because he's like, I support him doing that because he's South Asian. Like if an Anglo says that, it's like, no, you're worse. Fuck you. But anyone else, if they disparage the French, I support them entirely. But this news about like conservatives wanting to join the Liberal Party and essentially vote for a shitty spoiler candidate has led to a former Liberal MP named Ruby Dalla joining the race. She's been compared, one magazine compared her to Donald Trump, and she supported that idea. She boosted it. She said she was going to deport every single illegal immigrant from Canada. She's also an avid user of Facetune.
Yeah.
The Face app, it's crazy how much Face app she's using on her like informational stuff.
Yeah. Look, how could you get
as you have to call it?
She also, I believe, her candidacy, her position as an MP ended because of a controversy about her using like servants essentially as slaves, like just incredibly abusing them. I think that she now says is a Conservative Party smear. I believe she also had a brief career as an actress in Bollywood.
Just like, listen, I absolutely respect abusing your domestic servants, but never the French language.
Look, that's Canadian
politics.
culture.
That's great politics.
Wouldn't be the first time a Liberal politician had dressed up as someone from Bollywood.
I was going to say that, like, you've sort of gone from like Justin Trudeau in blackface to this particular person whose name I cannot remember doing like the yassified face. And so it does sort of seem to be like a problem in Canadian politics when everyone's afraid of their true faces and their true selves.
Yeah, except Quebecois. Only the Quebecois are willing to have their true faces show.
Maybe I was just thinking maybe Rachel Reeves could learn from this. You know, she's always being criticized for her sort of beleaguered appearance, which is sexist, rather than for her beleaguered views and shit politics. But maybe it's fight fire with fire. Maybe she needs to start yassifying herself. Maybe Keir Starmer should do it too.
Yeah, maybe Keir Starmer needs to start like using Facetune.
Yeah, I want him with like the Chad jaw. I want him looking like fucking Salt Bay coming out to make an announcement. Fucking sprinkling salt on the red box.
You know my opinion on what Keir Starmer should do with his look, which is full Balenciaga.
Of course.
High fade.
Yeah.
Sock trainers.
It's Yoji Yamamoto.
I'm wearing head-to-toe Gymshark.
Okay, that's a new one.
I've got the porcelain white teeth. I'm driving a BMW M140i.
I've announced the new Home Secretary. Bevo.
Yeah, they have the whole of Downing Street done up in that kind of like orange brick, so it looks like Barratt Homes. He's got an Audi A3 parked outside.
Sorry, I also forgot to tell you, Ruby Dalla, the spoiler candidate, is also a professional chiropractor.
Oh,
incredible.
This is like, that's the thing. That's who the candidate of the convoy was, not Polyev.
Yeah, absolutely.
Polyev is way too much of a political insider, whereas like a former Bollywood actress turned chiropractor who's obsessed with Facetune. If you want the Canadian convoy politics, that's the person who's going to be able to like thread the needle of Canadian right in an era where every Canadian hates Trump.
Yeah, not a guy who got his pension at 31.
Yeah, it's a shame. You know, we used to have better soft power in the UK because years gone by, that kind of Canadian wouldn't have been a Canadian politician. They'd have been a contestant on Celebrity Big Brother. But, you know.
Anyway, look, I want to bring it back around, which is just to ask. I don't want to ask what's going to happen, right? Because we genuinely don't know. We don't know what any kind of negotiations between Trudeau and Trump are going to bring. We don't know if like opinion polls are going to continue swinging against the Tories as they have to abandon their strategy of imitate American conservatives, which they've done for now 25 years. We don't know if like in a 1 month's time, you know, the US is going to keep using this threat of tariffs to like try to control its neighbors, right? We don't know any of that. So I guess the question is, one, what can we know? And two, what would the liberals and the conservatives do if they were smart?
Yeah. If they were smart, I mean, the conservatives, it's hard to even think about if they're like politically astute. Polyev sort of understands like that he's doing an imitation and appealing to a particular base, but I think that only goes so far. So I think if Polyev was smart at some level, he would just resign. Like it's like they would just invent a new form of conservatism because people still do really hate the Liberal Party, and if you didn't have a candidate that was completely already had a negative approval rating just from because he uploads clips of him yelling at the other side in the House of Commons and he just kind of sounds annoying, then like it's only going to get worse if he actually gets into power. Because previously I'd predicted that Polyev would get in, he would get an absolute majority, and it would be just Keir Starmer numbers, and a similar sort of thing where you only really get elected because of the hatred for the other side. Then people see you and they're like, wait a minute, you fucking suck, and then you get like negative 40 approval. If the Liberals were smart, I think they would probably be doing approximately what they're doing now. I think they've answered this in a fairly intelligent way. Not in the sense, like, I'm not even sure if, here's my Angevin chip, like unactivating. I'm not even sure if the retaliatory tariffs are a good idea. They're probably not. They're probably sort of insane and going to like fuck the economy even more. But there's no world where a national like Canadian political party that like would likely get elected wouldn't do retaliatory tariffs unless they were like insane Quisling Trump people. So they, that's probably a good idea to like garner support. Carney seems to be the one who's going to get into power. That would probably be the more intelligent one than Freeland. Because, Canadian conservatives have been making conspiracy videos about Freeland for like 5 years. Like people already hate her and don't really view Carney as like establishment, even though he was appointed to be the governor of Canada by Harper in 2009. They have a kind of positive image of him. He is also, of course, a charisma black hole. I don't know if anyone watched him go on to Jon Stewart, and that was him at his best, and it was incredibly fucking awkward.
Well, I mean, the thing is, they only hire the like most personally cool and fuckable guys to be governor of the Bank of England. It's our most prestigious job, and we only give it to guys who would like really cool.
It's like being lead singer of the Libertines. Basically.
That's the thing. Mervyn King, love him or hate him, he was a dick slinger.
That is
big
true.
time.
That is true. Yeah.
yeah.
But yeah, I predict probably there's just going to be a conservative minority government now. This maybe bumped them down from an absolute total majority to a minority, and it's still Keir Starmer numbers, I think, for Polyev. I don't know if Keir or Mark Carney would continue to be the Liberal leader after the election if he loses. Probably he'll be able to hold on, but I think regardless, really good things for Canada in the future.
Yeah. Well, I mean, good things for the economy and people's standards of living, maybe not. But to have like a Richmond Hill, like Italian hockey bro holding arm in arm with like a BC vegan and like a sort of a guy who refuses to learn, a Quebecois guy from like Trois-Rivières who refuses to learn English out of spite, and then Ricky from Trailer Park Boys, I think is a beautiful moment. Like, they should make a Canadian Heritage Minute out of this.
Yeah. We finally got Dark Trudeau brackets political.
Yeah. So this is Canada, number one dark woke country in the world.
Yeah, we're actually doing it. We're doing real dark wokeism.
Yeah. I want North Korea to start sending you artillery shells.
Yeah.
Real dark wokeism has never been tried until now.
Until now. This is the first time. Anyway, look, we've gone a little bit long. So I just want to say, number one, Liv, thank you so much for coming back on the podcast. It's always a delight to have you here, and people can check you out on QAA, presumably.
Yeah, it's QAA. We do like conspiracy theory stuff, weird internet subcultures. It's wherever they host podcasts. I also have my own newsletter at livagar.com, and I stream on Twitch sometimes at twitch.tv/livagar.
That's right. And this is Monday, so this is a free episode. There will be a bonus this week, which you also can listen to
for a mere 25% tariff on your income.
For $5 or either $3 Canadian or 50 Canadian dollars. I don't know.
Yeah, we're only accepting payment in Canadian now, in solidarity with our oppressed brethren.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, how much is $5 in loonies?
Five. That's $5 loonies. Okay. It's $5 loonies. A loonies dollar. It's 2.5 toonies if you're counting. You're counting that, and then all the other coin names, quarters, dimes, nickels, etc. It's the same as America. But the loonies and toonies are important. It makes us different and our own thing.
Yeah, you're willing to kill over that distinction. To be clear,
with Canada being forced into the arms of China, it's going to be Loony New Year.
Yeah, you will take my dollar coins from my cold dead hands.
There we go. Yeah, I'm doing shows. Come see me in Glasgow on the 12th of March. Come see me in Leicester on the 9th of February. That's very soon. That's this week. And Australia, all the major cities in Australia. Perth, Brisbane,
Chicoutimi,
Melbourne,
Dartmouth.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Kelowna,
Alice Springs,
Thunder Bay, Rivière-au-Tonnerre,
Toowoomba,
St. John's, Charlottetown.
That's right. Yeah,
Moncton. All right,
correct.
All right. That's all. Let's wrap it up, and we'll see you on the bonus episode, everybody.
Bye. Everyone.
Bye.
Bye.